Hi class, my name is Aubrey Michael and today we will be discussing important topics from this week's chapter. Chapter 6 will be the focus of today's lesson. Here is an overview of what we will be discussing today. We will be discussing diminishing marginal utility, budget constraints, effects of price changes, demand curve foundations, and behavioral economics. And lastly, the conclusion. So, the first question is, why is the Washington Monument strategy so misleading? Well, imagine a government agency facing a budget cut. Instead of trimming low-value services, it threatens to shut down a highly visible attraction like the Washington Monument. This strategy is misleading when we analyze it using the principle of diminishing marginal utility. From the text, marginal utility is the additional satisfaction from consuming one more unit of a good, while diminishing marginal utility means that each extra unit gives less satisfaction than the one before. Now, if an agency must cut spending, the most rational economic choice is to eliminate items with the lowest marginal utility, those that provide the least benefit per dollar. This way, the public loses as little satisfaction as possible. However, the closing the Washington Monument strategy does the opposite. Instead of cutting something with low marginal utility, the agency threatens to move something with very high marginal utility, a landmark that provides enjoyment to millions. Politically, it gains attention and pressures lawmakers to restore funding, but economically, it represents the worst possible cut. So, this strategy is misleading because it ignores the principle of utility maximization. If the goal were truly efficiency, the cut would target lower value uses of the budget, not the most cherished public goods. So, as you can see here is a little example from Chapter 6 of marginal utility per dollar, as well as the definition. Alright class, let's connect what we just learned about consumer choice and marginal utility, the two real-world scenarios, government budgeting and personal consumption choices. So, the second question, is it possible for total utility to increase while marginal utility diminishes? Well, let's see. We start with the Washington Monument example. When budgets are reduced, economics tell us we should cut items with the lowest marginal utility, the least valuable services. As you saw in the slides, marginal utility is the extra satisfaction from one more unit, and diminishing marginal utility means each unit gives less satisfaction than the last. So, class, think of your own spending. If you have $20 to spend on snacks, the first slice of pizza gives you a lot of happiness. But by the fourth or the fifth, the benefit is much smaller. If you had to cut back, you'd cut the last slice, not the first one. That's rational budgeting. But in politics, agencies sometimes reverse this logic. Instead of cutting their least valuable programs, they threaten to cut the most visible, highest marginal utility item, like closing the Washington Monument. The goal isn't efficiency. This is pressure. This creates public and forces lawmakers to reconsider cuts. Economically, it's inefficient, but politically, it's effective. Now, let's apply the charts and graphs from your chapter. Look at the budget constraint diagram. It shows all the combinations of two goods a consumer can afford with limited income. When income or price change, that line shifts. For example, if movie tickets rise in price, the budget line rotates inward, forcing consumers to adjust. They will consume less of the good with lower marginal utility per dollar and shift spending towards the higher value choice. This same logic applies to government budgeting. If resources are limited, the rational path is to cut the least valuable programs. So, those with the lowest marginal utility per dollar spent. Another graph in your text, the foundation of demand curves from Chapter 6, shows how rising prices reduce the quantity demanded. This connects to the substitution effect and income effect. Consumers substitute away from goods that have become relatively more expensive while also feeling poorer in terms of purchasing power. Government agencies face a similar constraint. They must substitute and prioritize when budget shrinks. Last, the text highlights behavioral economics. Traditional economics assumes rational decision-making, but behavioral economics recognizes that people and institutions don't always act that way. Closing the Washington Monument is behavioral. It plays on psychology and public perception rather than rational marginal utility. So, here is another graph from those texts. And to summarize, diminishing marginal utility tells us that cuts should come from low-value items, not high-value ones. Budget constraints graphs show how people shift choices under limits just as government should. Behavioral economics explain why agencies sometimes act strategically using visibility and outrage rather than efficiency, as we spoke about before. So, the Washington Monument strategy is powerful politically, but misleading economically. It goes against the principle of maximizing utility, and that's why economists view it as an inefficient approach. So, thank you, and that was the lesson for today.